Today I am replacing the front brake pads on my 2012 Toyota RAV4. Colorado winter isn't really cooperating with me much, but I can't let them get down to metal, so I'm finding a dry spot on my driveway. First thing I want to do is set the e-brake so my truck doesn't roll and take off the right or front tires. I'm going to do them one at a time because my driveway is icy and I don't feel like getting hurt today. Alright, so I'm starting with the right front side. I've got the vehicle jacked up, the tire off, and I've turned the wheel to the right so it's easier for me to access the caliper bolts. First thing I want to do, I stick a screwdriver in here and pry the caliper in a bit. Basically what I'm doing is depressing the piston in there so that everything's not super tight when I try to pull it apart. Then I've got two 14mm bolts to take this caliper bracket off. Once I've broken these loose, I can take them out by hand. You want to start them by hand too, so you make sure that you aren't cross-threading anything when you go back together. I can pull this guy out of the way. You don't want to let the caliper dangle by the brake line because that can damage the brake line, which is the last thing you want. So I usually try and hang mine up on the strut, then I can pull the old brake pads out. You want to make sure that your brake pads are wearing evenly. You don't want one side super thick and the other side super thin. That would be an indication that your caliper is hanging up. This is a floating caliper, meaning it moves back and forth across the rotor. These guys, you want to make sure that they move freely. We're actually going to pull them out and lube them up with some silicone to make sure everything is clean and moving freely. I pulled the sliders out, wiped the old dirty grease off with a paper towel, and I'm going to put new grease on. Then slide them back into place, make sure that the dust boot fully covers it and that everything can slide in and out freely. You always want to double check your new parts against your old parts. Make sure there isn't any hardware to swap. I've got new clips to install. These guys should just pop in and out with a screwdriver. Make sure the ones you're installing are facing the same direction as the ones that came out. Kind of difficult one-handed. Basically this little spring right here on all of the clips is what holds the brake pad in place. All four of mine, the spring part is supposed to head towards the back. So as always, just pay attention to how it came out so that you can put it back together the same way. Then we can slide the new pads in and compress the caliper. I slide these new pads in at an angle so I've got the top and bottom pressing that spring clip, and then I can get them in place where I need them. As always, make sure that the pad part faces the rotor and the backing plate faces the outside. These will go in backwards, but you won't stop. And it'll probably be pretty loud the first time you try. I usually use an old brake pad when I'm depressing the caliper piston so I don't get any scrape marks on it. This guy is just kind of a barrier. Then I just take large channel locks, basically squeeze this guy all the way until he's almost flush, or just all the way until he won't go in any further. That way the piston is compressed enough for you to have room for your thicker new pads. That's fully depressed. Now I should be able to flip this guy back onto the caliper bracket. Once you have the caliper back together with the new brake pads, you want to go in and pump your brake pedal back up. The first time you hit it, it's going to go to the floor, and then it's going to get back up to where it's supposed to be. Basically what you're doing is pumping that piston back out. Definitely dangerous to not do this before you road test, because you don't want your brake pedal going to the floor the first time you step on it. Oh, did I just do that? So my brake fluid reservoir looks clean and dry and good. My fluid level is still a little bit low, but that will go back up when I finish the left side. It's still between min and max, so it's okay, but once I pump up that other piston, I'll double check the level again and it should be good to go. I'm ready to put the right front wheel back on, then jack the other side and do the left side. Left side is pretty much exactly the same as the right, except it's a mirror image. As always, make sure when you pull your wheels off, you torque your lug nuts back to lug nut torque spec. I believe on my RAV4 it's 80 foot-pounds. What I always do is torque the wheels, test drive the vehicle, come back and torque the wheels a second time. You can never be too safe, and you don't want your wheels falling off. So that's it for front brake pads. Hopefully you have better weather for your job than I did.